I received a call, and this call I received was in the middle of the afternoon. It was about 3 o'clock, and I was leaning over my desk, getting some papers together. And as I was doing this, I heard my phone ring, so I picked it up, and then I heard, Murielle, I am not okay. And then I said, huh? What is going on? Why is it that you are not okay? And then she continued and she said, I am about to drive my car over this cliff. I cannot do it. I am literally going to drive my car over a cliff. And if somebody asks for me, tell them I could not do it anymore. Now, my name is Murielle, and I am an integrative therapist, an intercultural social professional, and I run a private practice that helps people to heal from past pain and trauma. And you may be wondering, what would make somebody want to drive their car over a cliff? Well, she was forced to be married into a family of wealth to preserve her own family. She was told that in this family, this is who we are, this is what we do, and you are not going to have a choice in this. So as I was putting together my TED Talk and putting together exactly how important it is, for us to be able to find, resilience, I had to come to the conclusion, even with the data, I had to ask myself, how much more resilience do we need as Africans? How much more strength do we need? How much more people are going to tell us about the strength that we need to have? And nothing will drain you more than being connected to somebody that you can't be yourself with, although you know them. So here she was, enduring this marriage, having all the strength that she needs to have in a marriage she did not want to be in. Why? Only because the marriage that she was forced into a marriage that could provide for her entire family at large. So it helps me to ask this question. Let's look at the hierarchy of needs from Maslow. According to this theory that we use worldwide when it comes to therapy, we use it worldwide in psychology, it tells you that your first need is physiological. It tells you first you need air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, reproduction. Now I want you to picture yourself in my therapy office for a quick minute. Imagine somebody comes in and they say, I'm having a hard time at school, I'm squatting at my friend's house because I can't stay at home, and this is what I need to do. And then I tell them, have a cup of tea, let's drink some coffee. First, let's all talk about where you're going to live. She's explaining me her problem from a perspective of, I need to graduate school. Where I live does not matter to me. What I want to paint for us today is essential that we understand is that most of the theories that we use in mental health, we have to redesign the approach when it comes to us as Africans and when it comes to us as people who face different challenges from people everywhere else in the world. It is not the same. Therefore, we also cannot approach it as the same because, again, it is not the same. How do you tell us, especially here in Nigeria, they just had an election, that we first need to focus on our needs down here below when we have cash scarcity at this very moment? You will now come to my office and I will tell you, let's first talk about where you live. Let's not talk about the scarcity of not being able to have cash. I cannot use these approaches in therapy for Africans. Why? It will frustrate you even more. Right? So it's the same thing as somebody not understanding where you are going or what you are doing. So, I want us to look at one more thing. Although we live in what other people would consider around the world as problematic situations, we still find a way to self-actualize. We still find a way to come up. You will notice somebody first actualizes a degree, starts working, then comes back down to now start building house, to now start putting things together. We first go and have children. You see here it says, the third step is friendship, intimacy, family. No, that's not how we do it. Over here, we get married first, then we find where we go live. Okay, first we get married, and then we decide, where we're gonna live. So if we have, issues with electricity and, trying to figure out how we're gonna do it, what does this mean for us, as Africans? And this is where I really want us to pay attention. I believe that as therapists, psychotherapists, who would be listening to this later, it's very important for us to start creating the idea around creating our own curriculum, right? Our very own curriculum when we approach mental health. We can no longer use the approaches that were used for the West. No offense to Maslow, no offense, to Sigmund Freud. I love all of them. But we cannot keep using approaches that are not going to work for our unique, tailored, and specific needs, right? Because we are different groups of people. I'm not saying they don't have challenges. I am pretty sure cognitive behavioral therapy, it works here as well. It works in America. But even with my American clients, I never treat an American client the same way I treat my clients in Nigeria. My clients in Nigeria will laugh at me. They'll say, "Ma, you don't understand." They will say, "Ma, you're speaking English, but me, I'm not understanding." So it's so vital and important that we learn how to tell our own stories. And I think a crucial mistake that we have made is we have allowed the world's opinion about us to become our identity. So whatever the world says about us, we catch up to them instead of creating, our own narrative. And there's this African proverb that I love so much. It says, "Until the lion tells his side of the story, the tail will always glorify the hunter." So until we start telling our own stories and telling our own narratives, people will have their own stories to say about us. Because how is it that everyone is telling our own story but us? We just follow a narrative, that they have created. I saw a video that went viral, and it was a mother crying, and she was crying because she was just saying her child went to school and came back, and the child was told, "Your ancestors were slaves." In a school book, the only thing they had to say about us, as Africans, it was, your ancestors were slaves. And the mother was crying, and it made me reflect, right? I studied in the Dutch system, and my favorite subject, I'm a nerd, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm a nerd. So my favorite subject was history, right? I sat so close to the teacher that if she spat, I wanted the spit to hit me. That's how much of a nerd I am. If you ask me anything about First World War, Second World War, and history, I'm your girl. I will tell you everything down to the last line, right? Because I loved history so much. God, the teacher loved me too. At the end of the day, she gave me a computer as a gift. That's how much she too loved me. So, history and love and history. So as we continued, right, I reflected after seeing this mother cry, and I realized no one ever taught me anything about African history. How did I spend all of these years in school and no one ever taught me about any type of African history? Here you have people telling us about our story, and they are not even us. So it makes me ask a question, right? When are we going to start telling our own stories? My favorite, I can say favorite, yes. My favorite of all time role model is probably Harriet Tubman. Why? She was willing to do the things that were hard, right? The issue that we are having when it comes to our approach to mental health and then helping people to understand, first you must understand where you are, is that when slavery was abolished, there was no announcement that said, "You are now free. This is your new identity. This is actually who you are." No, instead, you were free, and then you did what? There was no schools. There was nothing for you to start building a life, and then you started working for people who would then abuse you all over again. So it's so important for us to start asking ourselves the question, do we really know who we are? As I deal with clients in Africa or from the Caribbean, etc., I always want to start with that identity clause, right? Because even Harriet said, "I could have freed more people only if they knew that they were slaves." So I have to ask you the question, are you aware of exactly, who we are? Don't worry, I'll talk about how to be mentally strong. I'm getting there. So the story you tell yourself, and one of the speakers talked about it too, the story you tell yourself is probably one of the most important stories that you can carry. Who you think that you are is way more important than who people say that you are. Because those are the shoes that you're going to walk on. For me personally, before I was born, the doctors told my parents to abort me. They told my parents she will die. Well, they didn't know if it was a she or he. They said whatever it is, will die on the day that you give birth to it. Because it is so severely handicapped, it will not survive. But here I am, ladies and gentlemen, alive and well to the grace of God. And my mother reminds me, she says, anytime you're going through a hard time, remember you were resilient from birth. Remember that when you came in here, you came in fighting. So do not now think something else is going to bother you. They said you were not going to leave, my dear. So it's so important that you remember the stories that you tell yourself. I've been doing some work in Benin City in Edo State, and I'm going to be doing a mental health campaign there. And I was fascinated to find out that Benin was actually the first city with street lights, that they used to power them with like palm oil. Like, how many people knew that? Raise your hand if you knew that. We got 1, 2, maybe 3 people that knew that. We do not know our own stories. Our approach to dealing with mental health as Africans, right? I said all of that so I can say we cannot remove our own stories from dealing with the mental health approach. I cannot come here and tell you, oh, let's meditate, close your eyes. Everybody close your eyes. We're going to do 3 breaths. Let's do deep belly breathing, everyone. I may be able to do that in certain societies, but in African societies, what we are facing is completely different, right? So here are my own practical mental health tips for you today. So the first thing is stress, right? Stress is usually caused, basic theory, stress is usually caused when the capacity that you want to reach, right, you don't have the capacity for. First, you have to know, do I have capacity for what I'm doing? And how can I create that capacity so I'm not stressed out? Because if we go back to the Maslow Hierarchy of Needs, right? If you notice where I live is not conducive for me to, stay and finish and study school, start thinking, who can I stay with? What can I do? Who can I call? You have to start thinking about, we can't follow this approach. We have to indent the approach so that we can go. The next thing after stress and capacity, you want to unlearn all of the maladaptive behaviors. Yeah, you want to throw everything out of your head that people have been telling you about how to feel good about yourself. You need to start asking yourself, what do I need? What is it that I need to be able to do this? The next thing you want to do, right, is you want to pause. Can everybody take a deep breath for me? So breathe in and then out. Right, that alone. Next slide, please. So I'm going to be quick in explaining this, but there's something in your brain called the amygdala. What it does is it makes sure that you function properly, but what it does is it can also hijack you to the point where you're no longer able to control your emotions. So you're happy, but then you're so happy you forget to do your work. Or you're sad, but you're so sad that you don't want to go out of the house. So it hijacks. Right? It hijacks your higher cortex, it disables it. And the only way we can create, a barrier between this is if you pause. When you pause, you can now think, okay, what do I actually need to do? I'm happy, but I actually need to do work. I'm in love, but I actually still need to go to work. Love will just hijack your brain. So all of this to say that we cannot stay in survival mode. Sometimes the parents that raised you, the teachers that are teaching you, the people that are around you, they're all trying to survive. And if you join this survival mode, you will now teach your children to also survive. We are literally told that you have to work twice as hard, 3 times as hard to catch up with a world you will not even live in. Right? So let's create narratives and stories that are actually healthy, for us. Because it's going to take boldness and courage to do what my client did. I don't want you to think that the story I was telling you in the beginning that she ended, just staying in that marriage, especially as with me as a therapist. So, she didn't end up staying in that marriage. Thankfully, she took the risk to be bold and to be courageous and to keep to her essence and to step out of it and create a life on her own. And right now, she is very, very happily married. So, thank you for listening. Woo!